There are many ways back into the grasp of the yellow minifig clause. Some, like my next guest, just never stopped building. Some, like my previous guest, accidentally stumbled across the LEGO community online. Some are deeply into Star Wars, and some just get kids. Those two last ones were the triggers for you, aren't they?
Yes. Before we had kids, we started buying the Star Wars set because we inevitably figured that at some point we would have kids and we would want the first Star Wars set. So we bought all the Star Wars sets years before we had kids. Yes. So we have a lot of Star Wars sets now. And then the second important thing is kids. My older son was reading the Harry Potter books and the official sets were being phased out. And there's a party going on somewhere? Interesting. Anyway, back to Harry Potter. That was really the impetus for me to start building as an adult again. I've been to many of the places where the movie was filmed, and I had an idea in my head of what that really needed to look like in Lego brick form, particularly because in our household, the adventures that you have with Lego are just as important as the building. And so I wanted to build a great hall for Thorin, who is my older son, to play the Hogwarts adventures, and so I started with that. And then it really accidentally, on purpose, became big.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you if you'd heard of Harry Potter, seen the movies at all, but because this started because you weren't perfectly happy with the original Lego Harry Potter sets.
So if you think back to the first wave of Harry Potter, the original castle was just a wall and half of a roof slope, which, having an architecturally focused mind, was not adequate to making it look like Hogwarts. I've eaten dinner in the dining hall of Christ Church College in Oxford, which is what they based the real set on, and I wanted it. It's got pictures all over the walls and a fireplace on the side, and the window looks exactly like the set, and I wanted it to look like that. And so I actually brought up pictures that I had taken in the hall and used that as the sort of research for the original model. But then I figured, well, if you're having a feast in here, where are the house elves? And then I had to do kitchens and etc.
So good. So for BrickCon 2011, you brought a huge model of central parts of the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And people were amazed, but you were nowhere near finished. You came back in 2012 with your first finished mock as an AFOL, which measured about 4 by 4 meters and contained 400,000 bricks. Way to make an entrance, I would say. Can you tell us a bit about the building process and not least the race to get it done in time?
Yeah, so it was built in total about 12 months over a year and a half. And I mostly built from after 9 p.m. until about 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. I had 2 young kids at the time, and even though my brain was thinking about it, the actual building happened in the early hours of many, many nights. And really, it was, BrickCon is the first weekend in October, and it was the summer before that where I realized, oh my goodness, I still have all of this acreage that I need to fill in. And that was sort of I had to go into turbo mode of staying up many, many nights. But I really don't plan, or at least at that stage, I didn't really do any planning ahead of time. This was literally my first mock as an adult, and didn't understand the concept of the necessity of it. So it really was just building and building and getting until the very last week.
And at some point you get to sort of a point of no return that you build sort of the framework and you have to finish everything else inside. You can't just say, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that because it's building missing.
Right, and also it was a matter of running out of parts. There's a lot of sand green in there, and I would order, 1,000 little 1x1 cones, and I thought, oh, surely that's enough to make a roof, right? I brick built it and then covered it with sand green cones. Well, the major tower for the stairway, that has 10,000 1x1 sand green cones in it. So it was sort of like, okay, I have this idea, I figure out what I want to do, and then, and I have not nearly enough parts. So you order it, and then you wait, and then you
that takes time.
Come back. Yes, exactly.
So 400,000 bricks, many of them in sand green, not the cheapest color, and about 150 minifigures, Harry Potter minifigures, not the cheapest kind of minifigures. What kind of money are we talking about here?
I try not to think about it. I remember the reaction of my parents, who didn't quite understand what this whole hobby was all about. They thought I was a little bit leaning towards the crazy side of things.
I can't understand why.
Yes, and so they thought, well, you're spending an awful lot of money on this. And I said, yes, but this is actually much better than therapy. So this is creative, it involves my family, yes. And it took them actually seeing it in person. They came up for a weekend and I left it out in my living room, and then there was this aha moment of, I understand. And so for me, the cost of it is, I don't actually know how much I spent on it, but part of that is I tried not to pay attention to it because the value sort of in my own happiness and my own creative process was more important.
Yeah.
So.
I know you made a conscious decision not to build like a static model of Hogwarts. Yours was built to be played with. It has walls that open and roofs that lift off, so the two sons could actually enjoy it. Does it still exist?
Absolutely. It is in a storage unit in about 40 extremely large boxes. I wish there were better ways or more ways that I could display it, because that is why I built it, was to sort of be viewed and played with. But it is actually so big that not every venue can accommodate it. So I've had many inquiries into, can you bring it to this con or that con halfway across the world? And as soon as I mention how much it costs to ship it, then we have to start over.
But what you did is, because it takes up about 40 boxes that you said, so that's probably why you didn't bring it here.
Yes.
But you have actually built a travel version.
I've actually built two more. So yes, I built a travel version. Last time I was actually in Skærbæk, I built a suitcase version. It takes up one large suitcase, and it is the entire campus in microscale with the lake. But I also built a third version, and that is what I call Hogwarts on a Shelf, because it is just about 48 studs long, and it literally is something you could put on a shelf. It's only maybe 16 studs deep. And this one is a completely different view, because it's sort of halfway up the model is where land is, so half of it is underwater, and then the castle above it, because I realized the mermaids never got included, and so I built these tiny microscale mermaids, and there's a little Durmstrang ship and the whole thing. But that one I can keep up all the time.
So you became the Hogwarts lady, basically.
I do respond to that name.
Yes. So after having finished that, spending hours and hours every day over the last few months to get it done, you needed a break. And then you started on your second mod, which was a lot smaller, and you didn't even build it alone. It was a collaboration with fellow AFOL David Frank. So, of course, the model of Rivendell from the Lord of the Rings was much more manageable, containing only 200,000 bricks.
Yes.
Can you please elaborate?
So I met David a year previous to that. We'd actually showed up at our first LUG meeting at the same time. And in our conversation, we had talked about things that we like to build and sort of our own geekdom preferences, and we happened to mention that we're both Tolkien fans. By the way, my son's name is Thorin, in case that indicates what level of fandom we're in. And we happened to both mention that we really like the Elvish world within Middle-earth, and so someday we'd like to build Rivendell. Well, a year later, we both finished pretty large models, and we were ready to start something new, and we said, okay, let's do this. So we figured out approximately what was in the sort of in the realm of Rivendell, and then of course the new movie came out and they completely changed it, added lots more buildings, and so we modified it to accommodate sort of the old and the new. It is 32 48 base plates, and I did about 20 of them, I believe, and it was built in about 5 or 6 months, so also quite intense. I remember the night before BritCon, I had 45 minutes of sleep, and I was so half awake that when the documentary team was going around interviewing people, they asked me a question, and my brain just isn't working today because I have had zero sleep for at least one night, and not very much previous to that. So
It's the kind of answer they really want.
Yeah. Deer in the headlights, cannot think, get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, brilliant. Even though you had help from your family members in building Hogwarts, it must have been different to collaborate with another adult builder. How did that work for you both?
It was actually a really fantastic process. We have similar building styles in terms of our preference for architecture, but Rivendell was really a great collaboration. We each claimed particular buildings, but we also had established sort of style for what the windows were, the size and scale, and the fact that we wanted a lot of the buildings to be off stud and on angle. But really, I think where we truly collaborated the most was in the vegetation. There's a huge amount of plants on it, and we literally sat down. He brought his two boys, and I had my two boys, and we just built trees all day and tried to invent new ones, come up with ways that we could make it more interesting than just, oh, there's 250 trees on this. In fact, my younger son, Hadrian, he invented what we call a Hadrian tree that used these connectors. Because we had a lot of awkward spaces where we wanted a tree, but only maybe 4 studs wide to fit it in. So we came up with a lot of different ways to try and make it look interesting. If you look at the pictures, you'll notice that it goes from spring-colored trees on the left side to summer to fall on the right, so that we could use all of the colors of leaves that were available. Just sort of like a hidden thing. Oh, cool, spring and summer.
You were interviewed by John and Joshua for Beyond the Brick in 2013, at which point you mentioned having around 1 million Lego bricks in the house. By 2015, this estimate of yours had grown to between 2 and 3 million. In 2017, you mentioned 4 million. Is this where the supportive and understanding husband comes in?
Yes, the room formerly known as the master bedroom is now the Lego room. That was his idea. Because it's the biggest room that's not the living room, and it enables all 3 of the active builders in the household to have their own surfaces and to have the storage for the parts. And it is really hard to estimate part numbers, but those numbers are based on every time I get an order and I sort of have to evaluate, okay, here's how big it is, here's how much room it takes up compared to what I already have. And so the adjustment is, well, this is 100,000 bricks that I just ordered. How does it fit in with the stacks of little white drawers? So, yeah, definitely involves Ryder in the. He shares the philosophy that you can't have too many bricks, and so he doesn't ever mind when we fill yet another hallway or empty space with something brick related.
Good situation to be in then. You share this house with your husband and your 2 sons, and Thorin also plays a big part in your website, Pippity Bricks.
Yes.
What made you decide to create a website, and what do you use it for?
It's actually used for many different things. One was I am pretty terrible at posting things, and Flickr isn't always something when you're trying to share information with non-Lego people. It's not always the best way to share. So I created the website not only to put a few pictures of what I built, but also to create a place for his photos. He's turning 16 on October 1st, so he's still a minor. But because of his, he's in the documentary, he's actually the first person that you see in the documentary film. He is sitting in front of his model of Helm's Deep that he built, and my younger son takes his model of a bird and crashes right through the middle of it. But Thorin has built quite a few models, and we wanted to have a place for him to be able to share what he does in sort of a more user-friendly way. So Thorin is on there, but I also use the website for talking about some of the other issues that I've done more recently. I haven't built many things personally over the last couple years because I spent a lot of my time working with kids in schools and using Lego as a medium for talking about social justice issues, particularly equity and racism. And so most of my brick is sort of in transit dealing with middle and high school kids, and I'm starting to work in a juvenile jail this fall when I get home to use brick to talk about things that we need to talk about.
Time is running away, but using Lego as a way into other stuff is also something that you do with the Women's Brick Initiative. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the Women's Brick Initiative really has been an idea incubating over many years, partly because of my experience with building Hogwarts. And it really came to the three of us, myself, Shelley Corbett, who's a toy photographer, and Jacqueline Sanchez, who is here. She has all of her Lego jewelry here. The idea is that there is not always a smooth entry for women into the Lego hobby, and that there's a need for support and inspiration and a place for people entering the hobby and who are in the hobby already to land and to be able to be inspired. And we have found that there is a tremendous need for this, even in communities that don't necessarily know it yet. I've done workshops in 3 different countries so far. A good example of this is I was doing workshops in Hong Kong. And I was working with the ambassadors there, and I did 4 workshops in total. One of them was for women. And the ambassadors said, we don't actually know if anybody's going to show up because we don't know if there are any women builders in Hong Kong. And of the 4 workshops, it filled up the first. In 6 hours, all 30 spots were gone. And when they came to the workshop where we were building and interacting, none of them had ever met each other before. So they were there, they were in the hobby, but they didn't have a place where they could connect and find other people in the hobby. And so that to me is a perfect example of why we need something like this to get people feeling comfortable to enter this hobby. We have a workshop tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I hope many of you are there.
Yeah, if you don't go to the talk show tomorrow.
That's right.
Let me finish with a final question. You burst onto the Eiffel scene with 2 amazing and gigantic builds. Will you build that big again? And what might be interesting enough to deserve your attention?
So as I said, I've put sort of my personal building aside for these last couple of years. But the light at the end of the tunnel for me is being able to get back into building, particularly something big. I have probably a couple thousand orcs in bins waiting to be put into battle. And for me, the next challenge that I really want to build is Minas Tirith, which is from the last book of Lord of the Rings. And part of the challenge there for me is the building of the city. It's a 7-layered city and it's round. And it also has height, so there's sort of structural challenges, but it's also a massive battle scene. And to make that, there's sort of action and interest in all of the minifigs that can have various little interactions. That to me is like the most massive challenge, right? There's structural and a whole lot of white. So I've got bins of orcs waiting to be put to good use.
Can't wait. Thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah.